The rain came in sheets, blurring the skyline into a hazy watercolor outside Adrian Cross's penthouse windows. Inside, everything was still for a night that should have been full of celebration. Hours earlier, Adrian had closed one of the most significant deals of his career, a contract worth billions that would secure his place among the most influential business leaders in the world. But tonight, there was no champagne, no laughter, no music, only the cold hum of the city far below and the restless thrum in his chest. Adrian was a man who believed in numbers. Numbers didn't lie. People, however, they were a different story. He leaned back in his leather chair, the glow from his laptop screen painting sharp angles across his face. A report sat open, flagged by his financial director. Irregular transfers, large sums, all traced back to a single personal access code. His own private accounts, and the name attached to the transactions stopped him cold. Eleanor Harper, the woman he had loved for 3 years, the one who had stood beside him during the long nights, who had believed in his vision when even he doubted himself. He read the report again. The evidence felt undeniable. Dates, amounts, account numbers. All roads pointed to her. A muscle tightened in his jaw. He didn't call to ask for an explanation. He didn't wait to hear her side. Instead, he sent her a single message: "Come home, now." The sound of the elevator doors opening was soft, but it cut through the silence like a blade. Footsteps, light, careful, and then she was there, rain still clinging to her coat, hair damp around her face. "Adrian," she said softly, as though she already sensed the storm brewing in him. He didn't move. "Tell me why my accounts show over 100,000 missing, and tell me why every trail leads back to you." Her eyes widened, and for a moment she didn't speak. "What? Don't play innocent." His voice was colder than he intended, but he didn't stop. "The transactions are under your code, Elena. I trusted you, and you've been stealing from me." She shook her head slowly, her voice trembling but firm. "I haven't taken anything from you. I would never." Enough. He stood, his height casting a shadow across the room. "I don't want to hear it. Just go." Her hands dropped to her sides, her shoulders sagging under the weight of something heavier than the rain. "Outside, Adrian, you know me. You know me." "I thought I did." The silence stretched until it hurt. She didn't plead. She didn't cry. She just walked into their shared bedroom, gathered her few belongings into a small bag, and returned to the door. As she stepped out into the hallway, she looked back once. "One day, you'll wish you'd listened." The door clicked shut, and with that sound, she was gone. Adrian told himself he'd done the right thing, cut the problem out before it spread. But in the days that followed, an emptiness he couldn't explain crept in. He buried it beneath work, travel, endless meetings. He never reached out to her again. What he didn't know was that when Elena left that night, she carried more than her suitcase. She carried a secret that would change everything, and he would only discover it for years later, in the most unexpected way imaginable. Rain had long since stopped, but the streets still glistened under the soft amber glow of the lampposts. Adrian's life had returned to its sharp, disciplined rhythm. Meetings stacked one after another, evenings filled with business dinners, weekends swallowed by strategy sessions. He told himself this was success, this was what he had worked for. But in quiet moments when the city was just a low hum outside his window, there was an unspoken space in his life. He never dared to name it, but it was there. For years had passed. The memory of that night still surfaced when he least expected it. Sometimes it was triggered by the scent of jasmine on a passerby, other times by a piece of music playing in a cafe he never planned to visit. But the most haunting moments came in silence, when his mind replayed the way she had looked at him. Before leaving, Boston in early spring had a certain energy to it, crisp but promising warmth. Adrian was there for a charity gala tied to his company's new research fund. He arrived as he always did, immaculate suit, polite smile, calculated charm. Cameras flashed, hands were shaken, and polite compliments exchanged. Halfway through the evening, while navigating the crowd, something caught his eye, not something, someone. Across the ballroom, near the grand staircase, stood a woman with chestnut hair pinned loosely, a simple pale blue dress that somehow outshone every jeweled gown around her. She wasn't watching the room. She was watching two little girls laughing near the floral display. Something about her stillness pulled at him, like a memory scratching at a locked door. He stepped closer, weaving through the crowd until his view cleared. The world narrowed. It was Elena. She hadn't changed in the way people do when time is unkind. She had changed in the way light shifts at dawn, subtle but undeniable. Her face held a softness he remembered, but her posture carried a quiet strength he had never seen before. And then his gaze moved to the children, two girls, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, with eyes the color of his own. One was twirling with a ribbon, the other laughing at her sister's clumsy spins. For a moment, the ballroom noise faded. His breath caught not in recognition, but in the impossible truth forming in his mind. One of the girls looked up mid-laugh, and her smile froze when she saw him, not with fear, but with the hesitation of someone sensing a stranger who somehow isn't. Adrian's chest tightened. Elena turned, following the girl's gaze. Their eyes met. A rush of emotions he couldn't name surged through him: shock, regret, something dangerously close to longing. But her expression was unreadable, calm yet guarded, as though she had been expecting this moment for years. He took a step forward, but before he could speak, she bent down, took the girl's hands, and began to guide them toward the exit. The crowd shifted between them, and in an instant, she was gone. Adrian stood rooted in place, his mind a storm of questions and a single, deafening thought. Had he made the biggest mistake of his life? Adrian barely heard the conversation around him as the gala carried on. Laughter, music, clinking glasses. It was all distant, muffled, as if he were underwater. His mind replayed the image again and again, two small hands clasped in Elena's, the way the girl's eyes mirrored his own, the unspoken wall in her gaze. He excused himself from a conversation with a senator and slipped toward the exit. The marble steps outside the hotel glistened from an earlier rain, the air sharp with the scent of wet stone. But Elena was nowhere in sight. The street bustled with taxis, couples in evening wear, and the rhythmic swoosh of passing cars. Yet she had vanished as though the night had swallowed her whole. Frustration flared, but beneath it was something deeper, an ache he hadn't felt in years. He reached for his phone, fingers hovering over contacts he had long since erased. There was no number, no address. It was as if she had never existed in his world, except for the weight of her memory and the ghost of her leaving. Back inside the hotel, Adrian sought out the event coordinator. He asked about the guest list, his voice careful not to betray urgency. But she shook her head. Many attendees had been personal guests of donors, and names weren't always recorded. For the rest of the night, he played the part of the charming executive, smiling when required, answering questions, making promises he didn't hear himself give. All the while, his mind was elsewhere. By the time he returned to his suite, the city skyline was quiet, the streets below half empty. He loosened his tie and poured a glass of water, staring at his reflection in the window. The man looking back at him was the same one who had told her to leave 4 years ago, except now there were faint lines at the corners of his eyes, and an unease in his expression that no amount of success could erase. He couldn't stop wondering, were they hers? Were they his? Sleep refused to come. At dawn, he found himself walking through Boston's quieter streets, tracing the path she might have taken from the hotel. He watched parents lead their children to school, listened to the light chatter of morning vendors, and caught himself searching every face, every small figure in a coat, for a glimpse of them. By mid-morning, he made a decision. If fate had handed him even a glimpse of what might be the truth, he wouldn't let it disappear again. He called his head of security, a man whose loyalty had been tested more than once. "I need you to find someone," Adrian said, his tone low but resolute. "Her name is Elena Harper. I don't know where she lives or what she does now, but I saw her last night. She had 2 little girls with her. I need to know everything: where she's been, who she's with, and if she's safe." There was a pause on the other end. "You're asking this for business, or for you?" Adrian didn't answer. Within hours, his team began combing through surveillance from the hotel. Traffic camera feeds, social media check-ins, anything that could trace her steps. Each lead brought a flicker of hope that quickly burned out. She was careful, too careful. 3 days passed, Then, late on the third evening, his phone buzzed. "We found her," the voice said. "She lives in a small town, 2 hours from here. No public profile. No press. Works at a community center. And the girls," the man hesitated, "they're her daughters. But, Adrian, you need to see them yourself." A slow, unsteady breath left him. For the first time in years, the cold certainty that had defined his life began to crack, replaced by something he hadn't let himself feel in a long time: hope, tangled with fear. He didn't know what he would say when he saw her again, but he knew he had to try. And somewhere deep down, he suspected the truth might be far more complicated than he was ready for. The drive out of Boston felt longer than the 2 hours his assistant had promised. The highway gave way to winding country roads lined with bare trees, their branches stretching against a pale spring sky. With each passing mile, Adrian's mind cycled between questions he had no answers for and memories. He'd tried to bury her laughter in the kitchen, the way she used to hum without realizing it, the steady warmth of her presence in a life otherwise built on ambition and calculation. When the GPS announced the final turn, he found himself on a quiet street where houses sat far apart, their porches wrapped in wooden rails and flanked by small, fenced gardens. This was a place that seemed untouched by the restless pace of the cities. He knew a place where days moved slowly and lives unfolded without the noise of headlines. Her address was at the end of the lane. The small white house looked lived in, but modest, a swing swaying gently in the front yard. There was a bicycle with training wheels leaning against the porch, and a row of potted plants lined the steps. It was so different from the sleek glass walls of the life they once shared that he almost wondered if she had chosen it to be as far from him as possible. He sat in the car for a long moment, his hand resting on the steering wheel, his pulse steady but heavy. What was he supposed to say? That he had been wrong, that he had spent years convincing himself he had done the right thing, only to find his certainty crumbling at the sight of 2 small faces? The sound of the screen door creaking open pulled him from his thoughts. A little girl stepped out, bundled in a light jacket, her hair tied into 2 uneven ponytails. She skipped down the steps and began gathering small twigs from the yard. Completely unaware of him, a moment later, another girl appeared, slightly taller, with the same soft brown eyes. And then Elena emerged. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, her hair falling in loose waves over her shoulders. She carried a laundry basket, but when she spotted the unfamiliar car parked across the road, she froze. Her gaze found him through the windshield, and for an instant, the air between them thickened with the weight of her lost years. She didn't move closer. Instead, she set the basket down and called the girls inside. They hesitated, glancing back at him with open curiosity, but obeyed. When she finally walked toward his car, her steps were slow, measured, like someone approaching a line they weren't sure they wanted to cross. She stopped a few feet from the driver's side and folded her arms, her expression calm but unreadable. "You found me," she said, her voice low. He stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath his shoes. "I had to." Her eyes narrowed slightly, though not in anger, more in guardedness. "After for years, you suddenly decide you need to talk. I saw you at the gala," he said, his voice struggling to keep even. "I saw them, the girls." Something flickered in her expression, but she held her ground. "They're my daughters." He hesitated, the question he'd been carrying heavy on his tongue. "Are they mine?" For a long moment, the only sounds were the faint rustle of the wind and the distant call of a bird in the trees. Her gaze didn't waver, but her answer came without hesitation. "You don't get to ask that. Not yet." He opened his mouth to speak, but she turned, lifting the laundry basket again. "If you want answers, you'll have to start by listening, really listening. Something you didn't do last time." She walked toward the house without looking back, the door closing softly behind her. Adrian stood there, feeling the weight of her words settle in his chest. For the first time, he realized that finding her was only the beginning, and the truth he wanted might not be the truth he was ready for. Adrian returned the next day. He told himself it was to get answers, but the truth was he couldn't stop thinking about the way Elena had looked at him. Not with the fury he might have deserved, but with something quieter, heavier, like she was holding a truth too fragile to hand over all at once. The morning air was crisp, the scent of damp earth rising from last night's rain. He parked in the same spot and waited. Through the lace curtains of the front window, he could see movement, one of the girls dancing clumsily in the living room, the other curled up with a book. Elena appeared for a moment, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear as she carried a tray toward the table. She saw him. This time, she didn't turn away. She stepped out onto the porch, folding her sweater tighter around her. "You're persistent," she said. "I'm not leaving without understanding," he replied. Her eyes searched his face, as if weighing whether he was worth the truth. Then she nodded toward the porch swing. "Fine, sit." He took the seat opposite her. The swing swayed gently with the weight, the faint squeak of the chains filling the space between them. "You think you know what happened," she began, "but you don't. You saw a report, some numbers, and you decided I was guilty. You didn't ask. You didn't listen." His jaw tightened, but he forced himself to stay silent. "That money you thought I took," she continued, "it was part of a transfer I made for someone else, someone who worked for you." She was a single mother, desperate. Her child needed surgery your insurance didn't cover. I knew the system would drown her in paperwork until it was too late. So I moved the money to make it look like it came from an anonymous donor. I was going to put it back before anyone noticed. He felt the old certainty he had clung to for years start to fracture. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because the night you called me in, I saw it in your eyes. You'd already decided what I was, and I wasn't going to beg you to see me differently." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The quiet weight of her words was more cutting than any shout could have been. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and the girls, she hesitated, her fingers tightening around the edge of the swing. "They're mine. They're ours." The words hit harder than he expected. For years of wondering, of thinking he'd walked away from nothing more than a relationship, now collapsed into the reality that he had walked away from an entire family. "They deserve to know who you are," she said, her gaze steady. "But I'm not going to let you walk in and out of their lives the way you did mine. If you want a place here, you'll have to prove you can stay." The screen door opened, and the girls stepped out, both clutching coloring books. They looked at Elena first, as if silently asking permission, then at Adrian. "This is Adrian," Elena said gently. "He's an old friend." Neither of them spoke, but the younger one tilted her head, studying him the way children do when they're trying to decide if someone is safe. Adrian felt something shift inside him, a fragile thread of possibility. He didn't know if he could repair what had been broken, but as the older girl climbed onto the swing beside her mother, he knew one thing for certain: he wasn't leaving again. The next weeks tested him more than any business deal ever had. Adrian made the drive to that quiet little town every other day. At first, the visits were short, dropping off groceries, helping with small repairs around the house, offering rides when the community center's old van broke down. The girls kept their distance, curious but cautious, watching him as though he might vanish if they got too close. He learned their rhythms. The older one, Claire, liked to read under the big oak tree in the yard, her nose buried in fairy tales. The younger, Lily, had boundless energy and a knack for asking questions that cut straight through any guarded adult. One afternoon, she tugged at his sleeve and asked plainly, "Why weren't you here before?" The question nearly unraveled him. He swallowed and said, "Because I made a mistake, and I'm trying to fix it now." She studied him for a moment, then nodded as though she'd decided to give him a chance. Elena remained cautious. She didn't shut him out, but she didn't let him too far in either. She watched how he spoke to the girls, how he listened to them. She watched whether he showed up when he said he would. It wasn't just her trust he had to earn, it was theirs. One evening, a storm rolled in, heavy with wind and rain. The power went out in the entire neighborhood. Adrian had been about to leave when the lights flickered, then died completely. Without a second thought, he stayed. They lit candles, the glow soft against the walls. Claire curled up beside Elena on the couch with a blanket, while Lily brought out a board game. At first, the air was filled only with the clatter of pieces and the sound of rain against the windows. Then laughter began to break through, the girls teasing him for losing. Elena shaking her head with a faint smile she didn't try to hide. For the first time, he felt what it was like to belong here, not as an outsider peering in, but as part of something alive and warm. Weeks turned into months. He never missed a visit. He learned how Claire liked her hot chocolate and how Lily's bedtime stories always needed an extra chapter. He fixed the swing in the yard, taught them how to ride without training wheels, and let them beat him at games more often than he admitted. One late summer evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Elena stepped out onto the porch where he sat. Looking at the stars, she leaned against the railing, arms crossed loosely. "They talk about you now," she said quietly. "They ask when you're coming back." "Claire," she told her teacher, "she has a father." His chest tightened. "I want to be here for them, for you. But I know I don't deserve forgiveness just because I want it." She looked at him for a long moment, the silence stretching between them. "It's not about deserving, Adrian. It's about showing up, and you have." The porch light cast a warm circle around them, and for the first time since that night, years ago, there was no wall between them, just the quiet acknowledgement of what had been lost and what might still be found. The sound of small footsteps broke the moment. Lily appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "I can't sleep," she whispered. Adrian smiled and held out his hand. "Want me to read you a story?" She nodded, climbing into his arms without hesitation. Elena watched them disappear inside, her expression unreadable but softer than it had been in years. That night, as Adrian read to his daughter under the dim glow of a bedside lamp, he realized something. Success had given him everything he thought he needed, but this laughter, this home, this second chance was what made him whole. And this time, he wasn't letting go.